RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. Host Faruqi. This is your weekly 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB pros, competitions, the Olympia. Just over a month away. Hard to believe, just over a month away. It'll be the Mr. Olympia competition as we now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, a lot going on. Tampa Pro this past weekend. Josh Lenarowitz, a big winner. Derek Lunsford winning his pro card and pro show in the span of a week. But the big talk right now, the side-by-side comparison of Big Ramy 2017 versus Big Ramy of 2016. You just put up a video about an hour ago.
Yeah, someone posted this video of a comparison of Ramy at 6 weeks out from last year when he was working with Chris Aceto to 6 weeks out now working with the Camel Crew. And, there was a lot of controversy about it. Chad Nichols posted about it. Chris posted. I see everyone's chiming in. So I figured, I'll give my 2 cents about it. And if you go watch the my rant, you'll see what I have to say. But, obviously he was in better shape last year at this time. That doesn't mean he's not going to be in shape on stage. But, knowing how long it takes Ramy to get into shape, it does seem like they're pushing the envelope a little bit at this point. And I think that if Ramy's weight doesn't start coming down, there's going to be some ramifications. And the ramifications are going to be that he's going to be on stage not at his best. And that's not going to fare well for him if he's looking to break into that top 3 or higher this time around.
Let's get to the questions. Again, if you want to join us, you can join us on the Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com. If you're not already registered, it is free to do so. You can join us on our Instagram page, official_RxMuscle. You can tweet at us using hashtag AskDave or our official Facebook page. Let's go to Big Popeye John. Is it less effective to use the same compound with a different ester back-to-back in prep? Example, using tren acetate for 6 weeks, then tren acetate for 6 weeks.
I like to switch up the compounds every 6 to 8 weeks. That's just the way I am. If you switch from tren acetate to tren enanthate, it's still trenbolone. It's just one's a longer acting, one's a shorter acting. So it's the same compound interacting with the receptor. So that wouldn't be an acceptable I'll do tren acetate for 8 weeks and I'll do tren enanthate for 8 weeks. Now, it's the same thing. It's like saying if I take testipionate for 8 weeks and then I go to test propionate, is there going to be a real difference? No, it's still testosterone. The release times may be different, but it's still the same drug. Now, the great thing about testosterone is your body doesn't really acclimate to testosterone. So to answer the question, I would switch to another ester in between. Maybe go tren enanthate for 8 weeks, go equipoise 8 weeks, and maybe go back to then try tren acetate for 8 weeks. So, but to use something continuously like that, usually your body starts acclimating a little bit.
Go to Damien T. Dave, did you use, I don't know how this is all written out. I think he's trying to ask, did you use Clenbuterol in his days so I guess in your day, do you use Clenbuterol and for how long? Like how many weeks and how many years?
It's funny because I used to use Clenbuterol in the off season. I mean, when I was off cycling, I never used it for shows initially because I used to get lean pretty easily. And then I said, I look so good on Clenbuterol, so I started using it for competitions. But I never really used more than 2 or 3 pills a day, 20 micrograms 3 times a day. But I was an exception. I was very, very lean. So for me, using 2 Clenbuterol, I looked ridiculous when I would take this stuff. So you gotta use how much is necessary to get the job done. So a lot of people have to go up to 5 or 6 a day, 120 micrograms a day to really get the best fat burning, and I don't really recommend going over that. So I might use, 20 micrograms 6 times a day with people toward the end of their contest cycle to get them to their peak shape. But if I have a client, who's really got a fast metabolism and doesn't need more than 2 or 3 a day, then I'm not going to give them more. So you can't make a blanket statement. Most people do go up to 5 or 6 a day. To get as lean as they need to be. But the people with the fast metabolisms, you got to temper that down a little bit.
Let's go to Aston _ Ulysses. As a natural bodybuilder, what's realistic? What's a realistic aim for 1 year? 1 year in an off season, like shoot for a certain weight or just overall improvement on weak body parts?
Look, I always tell people don't put a number on it, because when I was competing, once I started, I guess, really cycling, I was putting 20 pounds of muscle on a year. I put 100 pounds of muscle on in 5 years. If I would have listened to people say, "Oh, you can only add 10 pounds of muscle a year," I would have only gained 50. I would have gained half that. So I didn't listen to people, and I maximized my gains. 1 year, I think, in 17 months, I think I put on 30 pounds from 1994 to 95. So, that was probably my biggest improvement. And that's when I really started looking super freaky. So don't put limits on people. I was talking to Aaron Singerman the other day, who owns Redcon Nutrition and who sponsors Dallas McCarver. And we were talking about Dallas is weighing 345 pounds or something like that. And he's not even trying to grow. But, he lifts super heavy. He eats a lot of food. He lives the bodybuilding lifestyle, and he's got great genetics. So he's growing just by virtue of doing what he's supposed to be doing. And he'll probably be 360, by the Olympia, the way he's going. That's the way bodybuilding goes. Don't put a limit on what you could put on, because if you put a limit in your mind, you'll never pass that.
Morgan Mac. Bodybuilding. Dave, is it better to run a higher dose of Tren Ace than Test Prop, or the other way around, or run the same amount?
Look, I've gotten this question a lot, and I know people are very confused by it, because I have another guy who just texted me recently or emailed me and said, there's a guy out there who's recommending only take DECA. Take 1,500 milligrams of DECA a week and nothing else. People are always trying to make up cockamamie kooky cycles, as if steroids haven't been around for 30 years and we haven't experimented with every conceivable concoction and mixture of how this stuff works. The best results come from a high testosterone dosage with a moderate anabolic dosage. 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week, 400 to 600 milligrams of an anabolic with it, whether it be DECA, equipoise, or Trenbolone or something like that. Those are the dosages that work. If you're taking 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of Trenbolone a week and you're only taking 400 testosterone, you're cheating yourself, because Trenbolone is very high in androgens. At that level, at 1,200 milligrams a week, you're going to get a lot of side effects: anxiety, overstimulation of the nervous system, super high cortisol levels because the nervous system is so tweaked out. You're not going to sleep at night. So more is not better of that compound. Now, that's a very high androgen compound. If you take a compound like equipoise and take it at 1,200 milligrams a week and only testosterone at 400, you're not going to grow as well, because it's not as strong an anabolic as testosterone is. So the reason why we have created these protocols, people like myself and other guys out there who've been around for 20 years, is because they work. And we've tried all the other combinations and they don't work as well. So, you guys can do whatever you want out there. I'm just here to inform you and give you information and give you my empirical data that I've accumulated over the years. I think someone asked me the other day, I forget the question, they said something like, how do you know, what studies have you read to prove that this does this and this and this and this? I said, the studies are life. I work with thousands of athletes over the last 25 years, and I see what works, and I know what works on myself. So that's the evidence. No one does steroid, controlled published studies. They might do testosterone replacement, but they're not doing if you take this many milligrams of this and this many milligrams of that, this is what happens. It's unethical, so they don't do that. The only people who are doing those studies are the athletes themselves. And the only people who know the data from those studies are people who work with these athletes for innumerable years, like myself and other people out there, not just myself. So, a lot of the stuff that we give you information-wise is just from data that we've accumulated from seeing what works.
Architect Personal Training, what's the longest or most drastic prep you've had to do to get someone in shape for a show?
Look, I've gotten people on diets, 280-pound guys that were eating less food than some bikini girls that I've worked with. I've said it before with Akeem Williams and Rashid Oldraker. They need to do extreme things. I've had people on 3 hours of cardio a day, maxed out, eating protein and vegetables every day, like ridiculously low calories. And that's what they needed to do to get in shape, And then I've had other people like Juan Morel, who you could feed thousands and thousands of calories to, and it's not enough to keep them from from going flat. So there's no rules. You have to just go by what you have. And that's why a good coach understands, okay, the science of what is going on from a nutritional standpoint, to a supplement standpoint, to a performance-enhancing drug standpoint. If you don't understand that, you can't make accommodations when you get someone who doesn't adhere to the rules. And that's why I started holding my Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru course that I give, because I realized that there's a lot of coaches out there, there's a lot of people who want coaches, so I said, let me start certifying coaches so they know how to coach, so they have the educational background to go along with the experience that they're going to gather in the field, so to speak. And for anyone who's interested, just to let you know, there's 3 spots available for the Secrets to Become a Diet Guru Coach on September 2nd. That's Saturday, September 2nd. That's coming up in a couple weeks. You can register at davepalumbo.com. Don't wait if you really want to take it. It's a terrific course, 10 hours. I take you guys to lunch. We learn a lot. We laugh a lot. And you get an 85-page manual with all my protocols in there as well to take home with you. So it's a great course. And once again, there's nothing better than learning about experience, but you have to understand the science too.
Zoro5144, Dave, when are you going to have the debate with Milos Sarcev on intra-workout nutrition? He believes it's a must-have, most effective are the BCAAs, etc. That will be something awesome to watch.
The problem with that is, first of all, I like Milos a lot, so I don't. And Milos does like to argue like I do, so none of us would take it personally, but it's his opinion, and I can give you my opinion, but that doesn't, mean anything. I mean, it might be fun to just do it because we both have differing views on it. But Milos is all about insulin. Take tons of insulin, and then because you have all this insulin in your bloodstream, you got to feed that insulin, or you're going to go hypo. So if you're taking 60 units of insulin a day, obviously you got to consume a lot of carbs. And you got to consume a lot of, he puts all the branched-chains in there and the creatine and just pile drives everything into you. And that doesn't mean it's working better. I haven't seen it work better. It just bloats you up a lot and you look big, And then these guys, when they start dieting for shows, they come down and they lose all that weight from all the bloat from the insulin. So there's some merit to it. I think that Milos would be a great coach, believe it or not, for endurance athletes, because the endurance athletes really need to be able to store all these nutrients because they're exercising for such long periods of time that intra-workout nutrition actually works terrific for them, Imagine Milos on the Tour de France, running a cycling team. They'd be marked for random drug tests every single day because of him. But they'd probably be winning all the tours because the recovery would be so good. It might happen. It might happen.
Kind of a general question from Kasam El Setri. I know we've kind of discussed this before, but he wants to know how to get the quad tear drop popping even more.
How did what?
The quad teardrop popping more.
Popping more? You mean me re-tearing my quadricep? Is that the question?
No. The teardrop.
Oh,
the quad teardrop.
Right.
He wants it to pop more.
Oh, he wants it to show more?
Question, but yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, there's different exercises you can do, okay? And a lot of people think that when you take a nice close stance when you squat, you're going to work more of the front quad. And you do to a certain degree, but it puts such a weird torque on your knee that I always felt that I got knee pain. I couldn't lift as much. I just felt it was an unnatural movement for me. When I opened up my stance, okay, and was able to open my knees when I came down, I felt now, not only was I involving the glutes more and the inner thighs, the adductors, but I felt that my teardrops got more involved. Why? Because I was able to go down much lower. If your feet are right next to each other, there's no way you can lower the bar that low without leaning forward. When you open up your stance, you can kind of sit back more. And I found that my legs, especially having long legs, I was able to go down further and involve more of the muscles, recruit more fibers in the teardrops at the bottom of my knees. And I found that my legs came up better that way. So even though it's against conventional wisdom to think that a wider stance would work more of the teardrops, I found that it did in my legs. And they responded very favorably. And let's face it, most people's legs who think they have small legs, it's not because their teardrops are not big enough, it's because their inner adductor thighs are not thick enough. And the only way to thicken those up is wide stance squats.
Let's go to Jackson.Adam16. Dave, respect to you and the RxMuscle crew. what are the reasons why some people experience testicular atrophy and some don't while on steroids?
There's a lot of theories on that, and no one's really proven it, but, let's understand why the testicles atrophy. If you take a shot of exogenous testosterone, okay, what happens? Well, a certain percentage of it converts to estrogen. That estrogen then feeds back to the brain. Inside the brain, there's a gland called the hypothalamus. Estrogen shuts down the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then can no longer send out gonadotropin-releasing hormone to the pituitary. And because the gonadotropin releasing hormone in the pituitary, it tells the pituitary to produce LH-FSH, which stimulates the testicles. So when we shut down that feedback loop, now the testicles are getting no stimulation from the brain, from the pituitary, to produce testosterone. So what happens is the testicles stop producing testosterone, they stop producing sperm as well, and then they shrink up because there's no sperm being stored in there. Okay? That's called testicular atrophy. Now, in some people, when they take exogenous testosterone, especially if they're taking high dosages of it, the concentration in the blood gets higher and higher and higher, and as that concentration runs through the testicles, it starts stimulating the testicles again to start producing this stuff, sperm and testosterone, okay, which is weird when you think about it, right? But it's not, because the reason why we produce sperm, okay, down in the testicle area is because the testosterone is being produced right next to it. So when testosterone gets produced next to the sperm-producing cells, now the sperm gets directly stimulated to be produced, and you get, high sperm output. When you're taking like one shot of testosterone, it gets watered down throughout the whole body, so the concentration running through the testicles is very low. So very rarely do you see a guy who's on like replacement therapy get his wife pregnant. It's usually the guy who's on like 2,000-3,000 milligrams of stuff a week that says, I don't understand how I did it. I got my wife pregnant, I got my girlfriend pregnant, and I was on a ton of stuff. It was because the concentration running through the testicles was so high that it reignited the sperm production cells again. And once again, it doesn't happen to everyone. I never got anyone pregnant. I could take probably 10,000 milligrams a week, and I probably still would be infertile. And I'd have to take HCG and Clomid and all that stuff to get my natural production going. Some people just have good genetics. Ronnie Coleman, enough said.
Let's go to Lift Forever 420. Hate the show more than Sid hates the Mets 2017 season. Hard times, my friend. Dave, Mark Lobliner recently stated that insulin is the most anabolic hormone ever, and that nothing will put on size like insulin. However, I've heard you state numerous times that testosterone is the most anabolic and the best muscle-building hormone. Do you agree with this assertion regarding insulin versus testosterone, and can you explain the difference?
Well, here's my challenge to Mark. Let's get two guys who are relatively the same weight and height and same genetic structure, and you put them on insulin, okay, and I'll put my guys on testosterone with no insulin, and let's see whose guy gets bigger. And I guarantee you I will win that bet, and then Mark will change his mind that testosterone is indeed much more anabolic than insulin. I promise you that. His guy might get fatter, but my guy will put on more lean muscle, okay? And that's just the way it is. Insulin doesn't build muscle. It drives nutrients into the muscle cells, but that doesn't mean it's building muscle. If your natural insulin production is working in your body, okay, then that should be fine. If there's no muscle building qualities to insulin. In other words, it's not like IGF-1. Which actually stimulates the satellite cells inside the muscle to replicate themselves and produce new muscle tissue. And it's not like testosterone, which tells the existing muscle tissue, get bigger, okay? That's not what insulin does. So that's why, if you want to you have to understand how we define anabolic. When I talk about a drug being anabolic, I mean it builds muscle, not just driving nutrients into a cell. I mean actually building muscle.
Let's go to Abdiel6013. I hate this show so much, I went and applied to work for MD. Dave, when running Primo, what's the optimal dosage weekly?
Of Primable? Is that what the question was?
Yeah.
Back in the day, we would do 100 milligrams twice a week, and we thought we were doing a lot, and if you were cutting edge, you did, 100 milligrams 3 times a week, because it was expensive. It came in the ampules, and you'd crack 2 ampules a week, and you'd do it, maybe Monday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. nowadays, if there is real Primo out there, and I'm sure there's some out there, but a lot of the people who've been testing their Primo with the roid test kits that I sell at DavePalumbo.com have been coming back and telling me that they're usually testosterone propionate or Dianabol or methyl testosterone. So I haven't really seen too much real Primobolan, but real Primobolan at about 100 milligrams every other day, if you can get it and you can afford it, because it's usually very expensive, is a good dosage. Now, here's the problem. The reason why people fake Primobolan so much is because it is really expensive. If you saw the interview I did with Bill Llewellyn, he explained the same thing. And so, cheap stuff, people will put it in everything. Test propionate, for instance, is cheap. Put it in everything because everyone will feel it. The problem is, if you're a woman and you're using Anavar, or you think you're using Anavar and you're actually using Dianabol, you're going to get a lot of side effects. I had a girl just recently who contacted me and said, thank God that you told me to buy those roid test kits on your website, because I tested my Anavar and she sent me the samples and the colors changes, and she had Dianabol in there, and she could have really screwed herself up had she not checked it. So if there is real Primobolan out there, about 300 milligrams a week is usually pretty good.
Jay Stanteno, Dave, your opinion on straps for shrugs? I've heard multiple guys say straps equal no traps.
Straps for what exercises?
Shrugs.
Oh, shrugs. I always use straps for back and shrug exercises, and I'll tell you why. Because your hands give out way before the traps give out. So I used to grab the 200-pound dumbbells and I would shrug them, and my traps were really strong. But I couldn't hold those in my hand probably for more than 2 repetitions. But with the straps on, I used to use the Versa grippers, I could hold them for forever. I would do 10 reps with it in there. So what do you think is going to grow better traps? Doing 2 reps with no straps, or doing 10 reps, with the straps? The straps aren't making you cheat, they're cheating your forearms. But remember, you're not training forearms while you're doing traps, just like you're not training forearms while you're doing lat pull downs. So it's fine to use straps on back and other pulling movements, but on forearm day, do forearms. Don't use straps for forearm training. So I think people try to, they confuse the fact that, hey, if you use this little crutch, you're not going to be training the muscle properly. That's not true. You'll never get a big back without using straps. Most people cannot hold the bar long enough or hard enough to be able to maximize and really fatigue those lat muscles, because the hands and the forearms always give out first.
Let's go to Rami Tanner. I hate you so much, yada, yada, yada. Is it okay to drink Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi, Diet 7-Up, Bolero, or Crystal Light during contest prep? Keeping in mind that I won't be overdoing it, only 500 ml per day.
That's fine. I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, if it helps you stick to the diet better, then it's a fantastic tool to use. Because if you can drink a couple Diet Cokes a day and prevent you from going into the cookie jar or eating a jar of peanut butter, then of course it's going to work. Now, obviously, if you overdo anything, it's not going to be good for you. But I used to live on diet soda. I would live on coffee, sweetened with stevia and whatever else we put in, aspartame back in the day, because that prevented me from eating foods I shouldn't have been eating.
Let's go. Good one here from Lee Axon. It's going to make you think a little bit. Looking at Big Robbie this week, I'm more and more convinced that we'll see a return to smaller frames on stage within 5 years, somewhere around 260 pounds. Yes, you can be aesthetic at 330 pounds, but it is pleasing to the eye. I don't think so. Your thoughts?
Bodybuilding is about big, freaky bodies. Let's face it. And that will always be the appeal. So if we got 10 big Ramis coming up, people will love it. I mean, go look at Rami's Instagram. He's got 1 million followers, okay? The guy just barely started speaking English just recently, So people love big, freaky bodybuilders. I can't stop looking when they put the pictures up. I mean, I'm a fan too. Even though I was a big, freaky bodybuilder at one point, I'm still a fan of the sport, and I like to see what the limits of development are in bodybuilding. So to me, I could appreciate a physique like a Sean Roden, but I like seeing how big and freaky some of these guys can get on stage. That to me is appealing, So I'm about whatever looks best, but bigger is better in bodybuilding if you can bring the conditioning and you can keep the symmetry to go along with it. So I don't think we're going to be seeing, if anything, we're going to be seeing bigger physiques. Wait till Dallas McCarver, comes into his own over the next 2-3 years. This guy's going to be 350, in the offseason lean, and he's going to be 320 on stage. I mean, so that's certainly not downsizing the physiques out there. If anything, they're getting bigger. And I think we went through a little lull for maybe 5 or 6 years when Phil started first winning the Olympia, and Kai Green was kind of the last big guy on the block. Jay Cutler, the last big guy on the block. But now I think we're getting back to some of the bigger physiques are coming back to the stage, and I think we're going to see a lot of super freaks out there, over the next couple of years, and that to me is exciting for the sport.
Mike Castlegren, how does one maintain fullness while on keto?
Yeah, I think that you can't put two strategies into the same bottle, so to speak, okay? When you're trying to burn and maximize burning fat, you can't worry about being full, okay? First of all, what's the purpose of being full in the gym anyway? You get slightly better workout, better pump, right? But it's not really functionally doing anything for you. So to walk around flat, I'm not talking about excessively flat, where you look like you should be in Ethiopia. I'm talking about a little, deflated in the gym. That's good. Why is that good? Well, because when glycogen stores are low, you're mobilizing more stored body fat. If your glycogen stores are filled to the brim, okay, and you're, quote, full, why would your body dip into stored body fat for fuel? It's not going to. It's going to use the carbs that are there. So remember, you only need about 40 to 50 grams of carbs to get you through an intense weight training session. And you get that indirectly even on a ketogenic diet. Plus, your body's constantly making glucose from amino acids via gluconeogenesis. So stop worrying about being so full while you're dieting for a competition. The goal of dieting is to maximize fat loss.
Let's go to Jimmy McFit. What causes hormonal acne? T, DHT, or E?
High DHT levels will irritate acne in people who are genetically prone. Meaning, if you don't have a genetic predisposition to acne, you won't break out even if your DHT levels are high. I don't think I ever saw a pimple on Jay Cutler's body, or Dorian Yates' body for that matter. On the other hand, I took one shot of testosterone and my whole back was broken out, and I had to take Accutane because of that. But I was prone to acne before that. I have big pores. My body finds the fact that my skin pores are big is a good way to detoxify itself. So if you're taking steroids that are creating toxicity in your body, how's your body going to get rid of them? It's going to dump them out of the pores. When you're dumping a ton of toxins out of the pores, it irritates the pores. They can get infected. Okay, bacteria grow there, and you get pimples and acne, going on. So not everyone works that way. Some people's body get rid of toxins through other methodologies, not through the skin. Same thing with hair loss. Some people have a predisposition when DHT levels are high and estrogen levels are high that they lose hair. Okay, at a much more accelerated rate than they would naturally. Other people could take 6,000 milligrams of testosterone a week and they wouldn't lose a hair on their head. That's just good and bad luck. That's all there is to it. Genetics.
Jacked and Juicy. Dave, your take on pure maltodextrin compared to your Carbolyze?
Maltodextrin is basically sugar. It's technically a carbohydrate, but it metabolizes like sugar. I've always found that it bloated my stomach. I just think it's like putting low test gas into a high test machine, so to speak. Like a Ferrari. Put the highest quality stuff in there. High molecular weight carbs like high weight amylopectin, like I have in Carbolyze, or some of the Vitargo products out there. They empty from the stomach quickly. They pull nutrients really well, driving them into the muscle cells. They are super easy to consume. I like them. That's what I use. That's what I recommend. Maltodextrin's old school. It's cheap, but you know what? You get what you pay for. If you want an upset stomach, it's going to get a little bloated after you post-work, drink that post-workout shake, then drink maltodextrin. If it doesn't bother your stomach, then don't worry about it. Like I said, I don't put a gun to anyone's head. I just try to introduce people to the highest tech ingredients out there, and that's what I try to put into my species nutrition line, the highest available, potency stuff out there that's going to actually do something. You don't have to use it, but I found that these things that I recommend are the most, I'll give you for instance. Someone contacted me, they were having knee pain. I said, look, have you ever taken any glucosamine? Yeah, it doesn't work. Well, how much have you taken? Well, I take 1,000 milligrams twice a day. Well, that's not enough. Try Arthrolyze. It's 4 grams of glucosamine a day. Yeah, Dave, you sure it's good? I said, look, try it. If it doesn't work, you wasted 1 bottle. The person used it. They wrote me a brilliant letter today saying how much that I saved them. They were suffering for 6 months with all this pain, and now it's gone. Okay? It wasn't that I'm that smart. It's just that I've learned what works over the years, and that's what I've put into the Species Nutrition line of products. It's not that I just sat down and said, how can I make the most money? Because believe me, if I did that, the products wouldn't have half the ingredients they had in them. Okay? I put in there what works. If it's a little more expensive in certain areas, then that, so be it. But I want people to take supplements that do something, not just that in their mind do something because it says it on the label. And that's just the way it is. You know, it's a very honest approach. And like I said, some people love it and some people don't believe it because they don't want to spend the money or whatever the case may be. You know, they don't personally like me or they do personally. I don't know. But what I try to do is give people knowledge. And then you can take that knowledge and do what you want with it.
A. Screnty, how far out from a show should you introduce trend into your cycle?
I usually do it around 8 to 10 weeks out. I usually do the last 8 weeks on trenbolone acetate, and that seems to work really well. Before that, you know what the problem is? Trenbolone, like I mentioned earlier, it has some central nervous system stimulating effects. Sometimes people can't sleep at night from it. They get anxious and anxiety. So you don't want to be you don't want to do 16 weeks of that. It's just too much.
Let's go to, so before I ask this question, if you haven't seen it already, right now on the RxMuscle.com and the YouTube channel, we have Dave's rant on Big Romney. Somebody posted a picture earlier on Instagram today comparing 2017 to 2016, and obviously working with, I guess, Oxygen Gym, working with Cita last year. So Dave did a rant on that, but let's go to the question. It is by Don Bailey. What do you think of those pics of Big Romney? Do you think they're posted, here's a thought, for mind games, or is that his real condition? Also, was the bet excessive to gain back? All right, this is sort of a totally different question. Do you think it was mind games, or is that really his condition?
I think that that's what he looks like now, and I think that the Camel crew over there feel that he looks very big and that they wanted to show that off. And they didn't think probably there would be backlash. And you know what the truth is? Everyone's a freaking critic. You know, the bottom line is, how will Romney look on contest day? It doesn't matter what he looks like today. It matters what he looks like at that Olympia when he gets on stage at prejudging. If they have a game plan and they're going to pull, they're going to follow this game plan and they know that they can get him in shape and it works, then we're going to applaud them as being brilliant. If it doesn't work, we're going to be critics and tell them that they screwed up. That's bodybuilding. It doesn't happen with just Romney. It happens with every single bodybuilder in the top echelon of pro bodybuilders. If someone comes off, we're going to crucify them and their coach. And if someone looks brilliant, we'll applaud them and their coach. And that's bodybuilding. If you don't like it, get out. Don't take it personally. I know Bader doesn't take it personally, and I'm not taking it personally, and I'm sure Chris Aceto may take it personally, but everyone else doesn't. So that's just the way the sport is, Did Romney look better at this time 6 weeks out last year? Yeah, he did. But the bottom line is that it doesn't matter what he looks like at 6 weeks out. It matters what he looks like when he gets on stage.
Take one more question from It's Lit Bra. Dave, the craziest pre-workout ritual you've heard of someone doing from back in the day, and what kind of crazy pre-workout substances have you heard being used?
Back in the day, in the 90s, when it was legal, people used to use Dan Duchesne's pre-workout called Ultimate Orange. My friend Vinny Hanzik used to sell it in his store. And Ultimate Orange was like a mix of ephedra. I think there was some caffeine in there, and there was some kind of carbohydrate. It probably was like a high molecular weight carbohydrate. Knowing Dan Duchesne, he probably had it 20 years before everyone else did. And you would. I never used it because I wasn't into stimulants, but I know a lot of guys used it. And you would just shake it up and you would drink it. I think it's still in the market, but I don't think it doesn't have the same ingredients in it, obviously. And people would be jacked, and they would go to the gym and they'd have great workouts. That's what most people used. I used to use coffee back then. There was the pre-workout genre, or the pre-workout, I guess you could say, subcategory didn't exist in nutrition. That was the only one. It was the first one, and it was the only one for probably 10, 15 years. And that's what people used who liked that type of a feel before they got to the gym. Everyone else drank coffee or maybe popped a caffeine pill. I don't know. Nowadays, it's a science like of how can we find the closest drug to Adderall or crystal meth and put it into a pre-workout to jack people out of their minds. And some people like that feeling, and I know there's a lot of people who don't like that, because when my Nitro-Lize was out, the one without caffeine, a lot of people bought it. But there is certainly a subpopulation out there, especially young guys, that like to get jacked out of their mind before they go to the gym.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Once again, visit speciesnutrition.com. Again, reminder that big Romney read by Dave earlier today is on RxMuscle.com and the YouTube channel. Go check it out. We have interviews planned with Derek Lunsford as well as Sergio Oliva Jr. Why isn't he competing at this upcoming Olympia? Keep it locked to RxMuscle.com. For Dave Palumbo and Johnny Styles, I'm Steve Verkey. We'll see you next time.